Imperfect Thriving, episode 57, Lack Focus, the top 5 ways to declutter your mind. I'm Catherine Ely, former attorney turned licensed counselor and coach. Oh yeah, and recovering perfectionist. It wasn't long ago that my self-criticism and fear kept me from having the self-worth, confidence, and courage to make my life my own. Through life lessons learned and by going back to school in my 40s, I'm finally enjoying my life in a way I never thought possible, and it is amazing. I want you right here with me. No need for you to go back to school either. I created this podcast to show you the way to the imperfect thriving kind of life, based on what you value, filled with self-worth, confidence, way more joy, and no more regrets. So let's go. So here's the deal. Our brains are tricky little things. They bombard us with thoughts constantly. Some thoughts are helpful to us. Some thoughts are not helpful to us becoming who we want to be and having lives we want to have. Some thoughts are more neutral, a reminder of something coming up that we need to do, stuff like that. Now, if we keep all of these thoughts in our heads, they begin to swirl around and we become overwhelmed and fatigued. And overwhelm leads to lack of clarity and focus, anxiety, and procrastination. And procrastination, of course, affects our level of productivity. Welcome back to the Imperfect Thriving Decluttering series. This is episode 4 of our special series. So far, we have decluttered our closets, relationships, and our environment. And I bet for those of you who have completed all episodes and taken imperfect action after each one are feeling lighter, less encumbered, and less stressed. If you missed these other episodes, you can go back and listen after this episode. Episode 53 was the episode all about decluttering your closet. The reason clearing out your closet is so important is that the clothes we wear affect our moods, attitude, confidence level, and how we interact with others. So check out that episode and learn step by step how to decide what to let go of and what to keep so you can absolutely soar in 2021. Episode 55 was about letting go of relationships. We're not just affected by toxic relationships or by those we spend the most time with. We are affected by all of our relationships. Check out episode 55 to learn the questions to ask yourself when determining whether to let a relationship go or not. These letting go of relationships that are weighing you down or not helpful to you is one way to move closer to the life that you want. And I've created the ultimate self-value worksheet along with episode 55. The foundation, the first necessary step in becoming the person that you want to be and having the life that you want to have is self-value. If you do not value yourself highly, you will not get where you want to go. If you are struggling to get things done and to reach goals like decluttering, then go grab the worksheet in the show notes of episode 55. All you have to do is download it and get started immediately. Now, episode 56 was all about decluttering your environment. A cluttered environment negatively affects our mental and physical health. So in episode 56, I explain how this happens and step by step how to declutter your environment so that you don't have to be overwhelmed and you can actually get more done. Now I want to give a quick shout out to all my friends listening in Canada. I'm so happy to have you listening to the show. And I would absolutely love it if you would DM me on Instagram at Imperfect Thriving and let me know what you want to hear more of on the show. Once again, thanks for listening. Let's get started with decluttering our minds. So I hope you stay with me until the end because I have an announcement that you will not want to miss. So here's the deal. Our brains are tricky little things. They bombard us with thoughts constantly. Some thoughts are helpful to us. Some thoughts are not helpful to us becoming who we want to be and having the lives we want to have. Some thoughts are more neutral, a reminder of something coming up that we need to do, stuff like that. Now, if we keep all of these thoughts in our heads, they begin to swirl around and we become overwhelmed and fatigued. And overwhelm leads to lack of clarity and focus, anxiety, and procrastination. And procrastination, of course, affects our level of productivity, what we actually get done in a day. Even keeping neutral thoughts in our heads, like our to-do lists, can lead to stress, overwhelm, and the belief that I don't have time. We need to declutter our minds of all of these thoughts so that we can free our minds to focus on the present, the one thing that we are each doing right now, not what we did yesterday or what we need to do tomorrow. Being fully present and focusing on only one task at a time is how we are our most clear-minded and productive. Let's talk a little bit about multitasking. In 2005, the BBC reported on a research study out of the University of London that found workers distracted by email and phone calls suffer a fall in IQ more than twice that found in marijuana smokers. The psychologist who led the study called this infomania, a serious threat to workplace productivity. One of the Harvard Business Review's breakthrough ideas for 2007 was Linda Stone's notion of continuous partial attention, which might be understood as a subspecies of multitasking. Using a mobile computer power and the internet, we're constantly scanning for opportunities and staying on top of contacts, events, and activities in an effort to miss nothing. Dr. Edward Hallowell is a psychiatrist who specializes in the treatment of ADHD. His book, Crazy Busy, has been offering therapies to combat extreme multitasking for years. In his book, he calls multitasking a mythical activity in which people believe they can perform two or more tasks simultaneously. He describes a new condition he calls attention deficit trait, which he claims is rampant in the business world. He explains that attention deficit trait is purely a response to the hyperkinetic environment in which we live, which is a hallmark symptom that mimics those of ADHD and ADD. Never in history has the human brain been asked to track so many data points as it is now. So Hallowell argues this challenge can be controlled only by creatively engineering one's environment and one's emotional and physical health. That was a mouthful. Multitasking might also be taking a toll on our economy. One study by researchers at UC Irvine monitored office workers as they were interrupted. They found that workers took an average of 25 minutes to recover from interruptions such as phone calls or answering email and returning to their original task. So this is not only going to affect office workers, it's going to affect all of us all the time. If we stop what we're doing every time we get a notification of our phone, a new text, a new email, and we stop what we're doing to look at that text or that email, it takes our brain time to reorient and get back to the activity that we were taking part in before we were interrupted. So John Spira, an analyst at a business research firm, discussed multitasking with the New York Times in 2007. He estimated that extreme multitasking, which is like information overload, cost the U.S. economy $650 billion a year in lost productivity. And that was 13 years ago. So David Meyer at the University of Michigan found that multitasking contributes to the release of stress hormones and adrenaline, which can cause long-term health problems if not controlled and contributes to the loss of short-term memory. We are really built to focus. And when we force ourselves to multitask, we're driving ourselves to perhaps be less efficient in the long run, though it sometimes feels like we're being more efficient at the time. Instead of multitasking, we should be practicing the art of paying attention. The art of paying attention the ability to shift our attention and to exercise judgment about what objects are worthy of our attention. Many who have achieved great things often credited their success on finely honed skill of paying attention. When asked about his particular genius, Isaac Newton responded that if he had made any discoveries, it was, and I quote, owing more to patient attention than to any other talent. So the question becomes, how can we declutter our minds so that we can pay sole attention to one activity at a time, one conversation at a time, be fully present and actually enjoy our lives rather than always thinking the past or dividing our present among multiple tasks at once? So let's do this. Here is tip number 1 to declutter your mind. Write it down. If you think of something that needs to go on your to-do list, go write it down. If you can't write it down right at that moment, make a note in your phone and set the reminder for a time that you know you'll be at home. So when the reminder comes up, you'll be able to go write it down on a physical calendar. When you write it down, assign it to a particular time when you will actually do it. So tip number 1, get it out of your head and down on paper. Write it down. Tip number 2, notice, label, and let it go. If you find thoughts hopping into your head about the past or about the future, you know what thoughts I'm talking about, thinking back on something you said or did that wasn't perfect, or worrying about an upcoming conversation or meeting, I want you to notice it, label it whatever you want. It might be future thinking, it might be past thinking, whatever you want to call it, label it and let it go. And that sounds simple, right? Well, in theory it is, but in all actuality, it takes practice. A little bit every day until you get it, but it does work. Notice the thought, label it, let it go. That is tip number 2 to declutter your mind. Tip number 3, limit the information you consume and intentionally determine when you are going to consume it. With all of our electronic devices, it is so easy to think that we must be connected with everyone and everything that is going on in the world at all times. Who says? Now, I know I'm going to show my age here, but when I was a kid with no internet, with no smartphone, with no computer, we would actually stand in line somewhere without mindlessly scrolling through social media, news clips, YouTube videos. If you wanted to do something when you were in line, you could people watch, engage in conversation with the person next to you, think, or just breathe. The number of people with anxiety then was alarmingly lower than it is now. Being constantly bombarded with information can overload our brains, causing overwhelm, stress, and exhaustion. One way to declutter your brain is to turn off the notifications and decide when you're going to check your phone. Check your email twice a day. Schedule your social media once or twice a day. Have a quiet time to reflect in a mindful way in the morning and at night before bed without any interruptions, without any computers or cell phones, with just you and your mind. See what happens. So, tip number 3. Limit the information you consume and when you consume it. Tip number 4, get completely out of your mind and into your body. I have noticed in myself, the more I exhaust myself physically, the more difficult it is to start worrying. I've seen this with my clients as well. The form of therapy I practice is cognitive in nature. It has a thought component to it, but it's also behavioral. It has an action component to it as well. When I have clients who are anxious or depressed or overwhelmed, I encourage exercise. I've not yet had one client ever return to my office and say that exercise made her feel worse, made her anxiety increase, or made her depression increase. In fact, everyone returns feeling less anxious and less depressed. So tip number 4, get completely out of your mind and into your body. Let's move on to tip number 5, and that is let go of expectations. How something ends up is not determined by how much you worry about it or try to manipulate it. We spend so much time and brain energy thinking about what we want to happen in the future and how we can somehow create the outcome we want, when our actions might be one variable in 20 that combine to reach a particular outcome. Instead, set goals, 1 year, 3 year, 10-year goals. Dream big, then reverse engineer the steps you must take to reach these goals. After you break down the steps, let go of the goal and just live the process every day. Live the steps. This is what you can control, and this should be your focus. Let go of trying to control the results that you cannot determine or predict with only your behavior. Now you know what we need to do to declutter our minds, decrease the noise, to lower our stress and anxiety levels, find clarity and focus so that we can get more done and really just be happier and more at peace. I'm so glad that you've spent time hanging out with me today. I hope that you will go out and take imperfect action to declutter your mind, find clarity and focus. And then visit me right back here for a bonus episode this Sunday, January 31st, the last in our series of decluttering. On the 31st, in episode 58, we will declutter our calendars. So until then, go out and take daily imperfect action toward the life that you want, and I will meet you right back here. If you are enjoying this podcast, would you take a moment to go to iTunes and subscribe? It is so easy to do, and it would mean a lot. This podcast is designed to provide accurate and authoritative information with regard to the subject matter covered. This is given with the understanding that neither the host or guests are providing legal, mental health, or other professional information. If you need a professional, I encourage you to reach out to one.